The call came in at 4:12 a.m., when the highway was empty and the desert air still held on to the cold. A long-haul trucker had pulled over near mile marker 117 on Interstate 80, somewhere between Reno and Salt Lake City, after noticing something that didn't belong. At first, he thought it was roadkill. Then he saw the shoes. Nevada State Trooper Eli Navarro was the first to arrive. His headlights cut through the darkness and landed on a shape half buried in the dirt just beyond the guardrail. A man lay face down in a drainage ditch, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, as if he'd been dropped rather than fallen. Navarro knew immediately this wasn't an accident. The victim's wrists were bound behind his back with orange zip ties, the kind used in industrial settings or prisons. His jumpsuit was gray, stained darker at the chest where blood had soaked through. Stenciled across the back, in faded black letters, was a word that stopped every officer cold. Inmate. The man had no shoes, no wallet, no identification, just a shaved head, cracked lips, and a face frozen in terror. By sunrise, the ditch was crawling with law enforcement, Nevada State Police, county sheriffs, then the feds, because one thing was already clear. This man hadn't just been murdered. He had escaped, or worse. Detective Mara Klein arrived just as the coroner was covering the body with a white sheet. Klein had flown in from Sacramento on an emergency call from the Department of Corrections. 39 years old, sharp-eyed, and known for her ability to read people the way others read headlines. She crouched near the body and studied the zip ties. "Those aren't DOC standard," she said quietly. A corrections officer standing nearby swallowed. "Neither is dumping a body on the interstate." They rolled the body over. That's when they saw the number burned into the man's chest. Not carved, not tattooed, burned. 7 digits, uneven, as if done in a rush. Beneath it, a single word, etched deep enough to scar forever. Time. The coroner confirmed the obvious. The man had been dead less than 6 hours. Cause of death. Massive internal bleeding from repeated blunt force trauma. But what bothered him more were the older injuries. "This didn't happen all at once," he said. "Some of these bruises are days old. Broken ribs, healing fractures. This man was being hurt long before he died." Klein straightened slowly. "So prison didn't save him," she said. "It finished him." By mid-morning, they had a name. Daniel Mercer, age 32. Inmate number 4471938. Transferred from Red Ridge Correctional Facility exactly 6 days earlier. Officially, Mercer was supposed to be serving a 7-year sentence for armed robbery and aggravated assault. Violent, yes, but not notorious. No history of escape attempts. No known enemies on the outside. And according to Red Ridge's records, he'd never arrived at his new facility. That's when the case went from disturbing to explosive. Red Ridge Correctional Facility sat 3 hours east, tucked into a stretch of nothingness where cell towers died and help came slow. It was a private prison, one of dozens contracted by the state to handle overcrowding. Cheap, isolated, quiet, too quiet. When Klein and her team arrived, the warden was already waiting. Thomas Hargreave, late 50s, clean uniform, polite smile that never reached his eyes. "We've been expecting you," he said. "That makes one of us," Klein replied. They were led through metal detectors, past concrete walls stained by years of desert dust. Inmates watched from behind thick glass, their faces pressed close, eyes following every movement. Klein felt it immediately. This place wasn't just holding people. It was breaking them. They sat in a windowless conference room, while Hargreave laid out the official story. Mercer had been transferred out due to behavioral issues. There had been paperwork delays, miscommunication, nothing unusual. Klein slid a photo across the table. Mercer's body, the burn number, the word on his chest. Hargreave's smile vanished. "That man," Klein said, "was beaten over several days, restrained with non-standard equipment, and dumped like trash. I want to know who last signed him out." Hargreave hesitated, just for half a second, but Klein saw it. "Captain Lewis," he said finally, "head of internal security." Captain Aaron Lewis was built like a wall and spoke like a drill sergeant. 20 years in corrections. No complaints. No disciplinary actions. When Klein asked about Mercer, Lewis's jaw tightened. He was trouble, Lewis said. Thought prison was a joke. Always talking about how time didn't scare him. What does that mean? Klein asked. Lewis leaned back. Some guys think prison is just time out. 3 hots and a cot. They don't understand what time really takes from you. Klein stared at him. And did you help him understand? Lewis smiled thinly. We all learn one way or another. That night, Klein reviewed security footage, or what little there was. Cameras in Red Ridge had blind spots. Lots of them. Entire corridors where feeds went dark for hours at a time due to maintenance. One clip caught her attention. Daniel Mercer, hands cuffed, being escorted by Captain Lewis and 2 other guards, not toward intake or transport, but down a service hallway marked authorized personnel only. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Mercer never appeared on camera again. When Klein asked to see the service hallway in person, the guards exchanged looks. It's storage, Lewis said. Old maintenance areas. Not used anymore. Open it, Klein replied. The hallway smelled like rust and bleach. At the end was a steel door with a keypad lock. Lewis typed in the code. The door creaked open. Inside was a staircase leading down. The air changed immediately. Cooler, heavier, carrying a metallic tang that made Klein's stomach tighten. The basement lights flickered on, revealing concrete walls lined with stains that no amount of scrubbing could hide. And then they saw it. A chair bolted to the floor. Leather restraints worn smooth by use. Blood darkened the drain beneath it. Klein stepped closer, her pulse pounding. On the wall behind the chair were faint scorch marks. 7 vertical lines, unevenly spaced. Someone had practice. Lewis spoke behind her, his voice low. You want to know what time does to a man. Klein turned slowly, and that's when she realized Daniel Mercer hadn't been the first, but he was the first one they let leave. Detective Mara Klein didn't sleep that night. The image of the chair stayed with her, the way the leather straps curved like arms waiting to close, the drain beneath it stained so deeply it looked permanent. Red Ridge called it a decommissioned maintenance area. Klein knew a ritual room when she saw one. By sunrise, the basement was sealed as an active crime scene. State investigators arrived, then federal auditors. And by noon, Captain Aaron Lewis had been placed on administrative leave, though no cuffs touched his wrists. Not yet. The official story leaked almost immediately, claimed an unauthorized use of force incident, a rogue officer, an internal failure, contained, under review. Klein had heard that language before. It was how institutions buried bodies without moving dirt. She stood in the warden's office, flipping through years of archived inmate files, her finger tapping faster with every page. These men, she said, stopping abruptly. Where are they? Warden Hargreave adjusted his tie. Transferred. Released. Some paroled early. Klein turned the screen toward him. 5 names highlighted in red. All violent offenders. All listed as transferred within the past 18 months. All marked with identical paperwork errors. Missing intake confirmations at their destination facilities. And none of them, Klein said, ever showed up anywhere else. Hargreave's face paled. That's not possible. It is when paperwork replaces people, Klein replied. The FBI task force arrived that afternoon. They brought financial analysts, behavioral profilers, and one quiet man who introduced himself simply as Agent Nolan Price. He didn't talk much. He watched. Price reviewed the basement photos for a long time. This isn't punishment, he said finally. It's indoctrination. What do you mean? Klein asked. These men weren't just beaten, Price continued. They were conditioned, broken down over time. Someone wanted them to understand something before they died. Klein thought the word burned into Mercer's chest. Time. By evening, Red Ridge Correctional Facility was locked down. Guards were separated and questioned. Inmates were confined to their cells. The desert around the prison buzzed with unmarked vehicles and satellite vans. And still, no one had answers. Then the first guard disappeared. Officer Caleb Rourke, 26, new to Red Ridge, hadn't shown up for his shift. His car was found abandoned at a rest stop 20 miles away. Engine cold, phone still inside. Security footage from the rest stop showed Rourke stepping out his car at 2:03 a.m., looking around nervously, then following someone off camera. He never came back. Captain Lewis was brought in for questioning again. "I didn't leave the city," Lewis said calmly. "Check the cameras. Check my phone." They did. Everything lined up. Too perfectly. Klein leaned forward during the interview. "You built a room where men disappeared," she said. "Now one of your own is gone. You expect me to believe that's a coincidence." Lewis met her gaze. "You think I'm the only one who knows what that basement was for?" That was the moment Klein understood the scope of what they were dealing with. Red Ridge wasn't a secret operation run by one sadistic captain. It was a system. That night, an inmate named Luis Ortega hanged himself in cell block C. At least, that's what the guards claimed. Klein stood over Ortega's body in the infirmary. Her jaw clenched. The ligature marks were wrong. The bruising on his arms too symmetrical, and carved faintly into his forearm, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, were 7 small tally marks. She showed the marks to Agent Price. "He was next," Price said, "or he saw something." Word spread to the prison faster than any official announcement. Inmates stopped talking. Guards started requesting transfers. Some quit outright, and someone started erasing files. Digital records vanished overnight. Surveillance backups corrupted. Maintenance logs wiped clean. Every attempt to reconstruct the paper trail hit the same wall. Authorization codes belonging to one person, Warden Thomas Hargreave. When agents went to detain him, his office was empty. His car was found hours later at the edge of a dried reservoir. The driver's door stood open. The keys lay on the seat. No sign of a struggle. No sign of Hargreave. Klein stood at the reservoir's edge, staring down at the cracked earth below. "Their cleaning house," she said. Price nodded. "Or finishing the lesson." That's when Klein's phone rang. The number was blocked. She answered anyway. A man's voice came through, distorted but calm, almost gentle. "You're asking the wrong question, detective," the voice said. Klein signaled Price to trace the call. "What question should I be asking?" she replied. There was a pause. "You want to know who killed Daniel Mercer," the voice said. "But the real question is, why did he beg to go back?" The line went dead. The trace failed. Klein felt something cold settle in her chest. They pulled Mercer's prison correspondence that night. Every letter, every recorded call. Most were mundane. Arguments with family, complaint about food, threats to sue. But one call, made 3 days before his transfer, stood out. Mercer's voice was shaky, unrecognizable from the confident tone in earlier recordings. "I messed up," he said. "I shouldn't have laughed. I didn't know what they meant." The person on the other end, his younger brother, sounded confused. "What are you talking about?" "They make you watch," Mercer whispered. "They make you count." "Count what?" There was a long silence. "Time," Mercer said. "Every second, every scream. And when you think you're done, they reset the clock." The call ended abruptly. Klein closed her eyes. That same night, a fire broke out in the prison's administrative wing. Sprinklers failed. Alarms were delayed. By the time firefighters arrived, the records room was gone. Officially, it was an electrical issue. Unofficially, it was an execution. Agent Price stood beside Klein as they watched smoke curl into the night sky. "They're not running anymore," he said. "They're controlling the ending." At 3:18 a.m., Klein received an email from an anonymous address. No text, just a video file. She opened it. The footage was grainy, shot from a high corner, another hidden camera. It showed the basement chair, empty at first. Then a man was dragged into frame. Officer Caleb Rourke. He was sobbing, wristbound with orange zip ties. A voice off camera spoke, calm and measured. "You thought time was on your side," the voice said. "You thought wearing the uniform made you immune." Rourke screamed as the chair's restraints closed. The camera tilted slightly, revealing a wall Klein hadn't seen before. On it were names, dozens of them, each crossed out. At the bottom, freshly written, still clean and white against the concrete, were two new entries. Rourke, C. Klein, M. The video cut to black. And somewhere inside Red Ridge Correctional Facility, a clock started ticking again. Mara Klein stared at her own name on the wall long after the screen went dark. Rourke's scream still echoed in her ears, looping the way trauma always does, too loud, too close, impossible to shut off. Agent Price was already moving, barking orders, locking down the building, calling in every federal resource that could fly, drive, or crawl. "They want you scared," he said, gripping Klein's shoulder. "That means you're close." Klein wasn't sure that was comforting. They pulled the metadata from a video. It hadn't been sent from inside Red Ridge, or anywhere near it. The signal bounced through 3 countries, a private server, then vanished. Whoever was behind this wasn't just brutal. They were organized and patient. The prison was evacuated by dawn. Inmates transferred. Guards detained. Red Ridge Correctional Facility, once sold to the public as a solution to overcrowding, now stood empty, its concrete halls silent, its secrets finally exposed to light. Or so they thought. In the basement, forensic teams uncovered more than stains and restraints. Behind a false wall, they found lockers. Inside each one, folded uniforms, personal effects, and meticulously labeled evidence bags. Watches, wedding rings, letters from children, trophies. These weren't impulsive killings, Klein said, her voice hollow. This was a process. Agent Price nodded grimly. A curriculum. They pieced it together slowly. Years earlier, Red Ridge had been flagged for excessive use of force complaints. Nothing had stuck. Witnesses recanted. Video footage malfunctioned. The state renewed the contract anyway. That's when the program began. Select inmates, violent, unlikable, easy to discredit, were pulled from general population and brought downstairs. There, they were subjected to what internal documents called temporal accountability sessions, isolation, sleep deprivation, repetitive stress positions, forced observation of other inmates being punished, every second timed, every reaction logged. The goal wasn't information. It was transformation. They wanted to create something, Klein said. People who understood fear the way they did. And when the inmates broke, Price asked, Klein swallowed. They disappeared. But Daniel Mercer had laughed. That was a mistake. Mercer had mocked the idea that prison could really change him. He'd treated it like a pause button. Timeout. And for that, they decided he needed a lesson no one survived. Except Mercer hadn't just been punished. He'd been studied. In the ashes of the records room, investigators recovered a fire-damaged hard drive. On it was a single intact folder labeled release candidates. Only one name inside, Daniel Mercer. The room went quiet. They were going to let him go, Price said slowly. No, Klein replied. They were going to watch what he did. The theory was chilling. Red Ridge wasn't just killing inmates. They were experimenting, trying to see if extreme punishment could reprogram violent offenders into something else, something controlled. And when Mercer realized what they'd done to him, he panicked, begged to go back, tried to disappear. So they made an example of him. Klein's phone rang again that night. Blocked number. She answered without hesitation. You shouldn't have put my name on the wall, she said. The voice on the other end chuckled softly. You put yourself there, detective. Curiosity has a cost. Who are you? Klein demanded. A pause. Then, someone who finished a sentence. The call ended. They found Captain Aaron Lewis 2 days later. He was hanging in a motel room in Arizona, a handwritten note pinned to his chest with a steak knife. Time served. The official ruling was suicide. Klein didn't believe it for a second. Lewis had been a believer, not a leader, a soldier who followed doctrine. And doctrines don't die that easily. Then the leak started. Anonymous packages sent to newsrooms across the country. Photos, videos, documents. Enough to spark national outrage. Congressional hearings. Lawsuits. Red Ridge was shut down permanently. Other private facilities scrambled, audited, distanced themselves. The public wanted a monster. They were given a dead captain and a missing warden. Case closed. Except Klein knew better. 3 months later, she stood on the platform of a crowded subway station in Chicago, the noise pressing in from all sides. She transferred off the task force after receiving a final, untraceable message that read simply, "You were never the target." She felt it then, the sensation she tried to ignore since Red Ridge. She was being watched. The train arrived in a rush of wind. People surged forward. Klein stepped back, scanning faces. That's when she saw him, a man in his early 30s. Shaved head, calm eyes. He wore a maintenance uniform and held a mop like he'd done it his whole life. Their eyes met. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing one. Klein's breath caught. She followed him onto the train. The doors closed. The train lurched forward. The man stood at the far end of the car, hands folded, unbothered by the crowd. Klein moved closer. "Do I know you?" she asked. The man tilted his head. "No," he said softly. "But you helped me remember." "Remember what?" He glanced at the digital clock above the door. "How much time costs?" Before Klein could respond, the train screeched to a halt between stations. The lights flickered, then dimmed. Groans rippled through the car. Emergency lighting clicked on. The man leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the murmurs. "They taught us patience," he said. "They taught us to wait, to watch, to count. Us." Klein whispered. The man stepped back as the lights returned. When the train pulled into the next station, the doors opened. He was gone. Klein stood frozen as passengers poured out around her. On the seat where the man had been standing was a folded piece of paper. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a list. Names. Judges. Wardens. Politicians. Contractors. Some crossed out, some not. At the bottom, written in careful block letters, was a message. Prison was never timeout. It was training. That night, in a quiet suburb outside Denver, a city councilman was found dead in his home. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Burned into his chest were 7 numbers. And one word. Time. They said the killer was caught weeks later. A lone extremist. A convenient story. The headlines moved on. But Klein kept a list. Because every time a name disappeared from the news, she crossed out herself. And somewhere out there, people who had learned the lesson were still counting. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because some sentences don't end when the cell door opens.